Welcome to the Foojay Podcast, all your news about OpenJDK.
Welcome in part 4 of the JCON interviews. In this episode I have 5 new guests for you and various topics like test containers, ToxiProxy, virtual threads, Flaky Tests and more. But let's first start with garbage collectors and intelligence cloud, a tool created by Azul to find out which of your code is actually being used in production and which dependencies are known to have vulnerabilities. My colleague Gerrit Grunwald was at JCON to give a talk about these subjects.
I'm Gerrit Grunwald, working with this guy, right, at Azul. And love coding.
And you're here as a speaker?
Yes.
About the garbage collector. We already mentioned it.
Yep.
It's something which is hidden for most people. They are not even aware of it.
And which is a good thing. Because that means the JVM developers did a good job. But still, sometimes I think it's good to have some basic knowledge about what's going on in garbage collection. Mm-hmm. I'm not a garbage collection expert, not by far not, but I just read into it and I find it's really interesting, and I just would like to share this stuff with people because for most of them it's like, oh, I didn't know. Yeah. And that's a good thing.
Well, I've been developing Java for over 10 years before I joined Azul, and one of my first assignments was write a blog post about the garbage collector. And the fun thing is, by working at Azul, we can talk to people, our colleagues who developed some of these, because there are several garbage collectors available. So it was my first published blog post for the Azul website.
And a quite successful one.
But it took me some time because indeed, there is a lot of knowledge, there are a lot of different garbage collectors, and then try to condense that
into a blog post.
Is quite a challenge. It's probably the same thing for your talk.
Yeah, so I started working on the talk last year, September, and it's not done yet.
Is the talk ever finished?
No, not for me. It's because it's like, I mean, the original version came with 270 slides.
For 1 hour.
Which was not possible, right? So I had to strip down, but for me it's like, how to say that? It's like a notebook. So if I go to the slides, I put all the information that I find in there so that I can present it. And then afterwards I have to condense it, similar to the blog post. And then figure out what can I leave out and what is the important thing. The problem is you have to do it to learn what works in a conference session and what doesn't work. So it's always a challenge to do that. But as you said, it's so many things to cover. And it's so fascinating once you started looking into that. I just scratched the surface, but it's, as you mentioned, when you talk with Gil, for example, which is our CEO, who developed C4, which is the garbage collector in Azul Prime, it's so fascinating. When you talk with him, you get so many insights. It's overflow, right? It's information overflow. You probably had the same experience, but it's fascinating. Once you get a basic understanding, you at least understand what the people are talking about. To be honest, when I was younger and still already was a developer, I never attended garbage collection sessions because it was way over my head. It was just so complex. And if you don't have the basic knowledge, you can't follow them because these people dig into all these details and you need the basic understanding to be part of that discussion. And now, once I did this session, I'm feeling prepared to be able to talk to Gil and understand what he's talking about, because otherwise he after a minute, he's just off. and it's fascinating. I can just recommend taking a look at it. I mean,
you have this paper describing the C4 garbage collector. That's too heavy for me. I have to admit.
It's really. But to be honest, I know I get it. So I get how it works, and it's really cool. And if you think about that, we did that more than 10 years ago already. And ZGC, which is more or less a copy of C4, right? So they just came up with that now.
Yeah.
So, but we do that for already more than 10 years. We did it in hardware in the beginning. So it's really fascinating to see the history of this garbage collector and what it is able to do, right? It's really cool.
You are a developer advocate for Azul. Mm-hmm. So that means that you're never home. You're always speaking at JUX conferences.
Well, it's part of the job. Yeah.
Part of the job. So you have several topics. You talk about crack, you talk about garbage collection, about security,
About intelligence cloud in the future.
intelligence cloud, which is the product by Azul,
Yeah.
to find out what's running in your.
Yeah.
What's your favorite topic, or is that one for the next section?
So crack was one of my favorite topics because I just like the idea. It's simple. It solves a problem, the startup problem, and it's working right now. Right? That's why I really like it. And you don't have to step away from Java like that. You have to do with native image, right? Native image is also nice, but it's different, right? It's not Java anymore. With crack, you stay in the Java area. That's what I like. But now that we came up with Intelligence Cloud in the beginning of this month, and I was looking into code inventory, which is one of the features besides the vulnerability detection. And now I did that for the last 3 weeks, getting a better understanding on how it works, how the API works, and all this. Built a demo for that and an application. And I think this will be my next favorite thing to talk about. So I don't have a session yet, but I will probably prepare one because it's quite cool. So getting the ideas, if we have the time shortly, but the idea is you have your application running in the cloud, and there are tools that tell you, oh, you have dependencies here, you have dependencies there. That means the IDE and these tools know exactly the dependencies of your classes to figure out what classes are never really, or where you don't have any dependencies. But what is the stuff that you've wrote, the code that you've wrote? How do you know if it's really used in production? That might be easy if you start with something new, but if you are working in a bank or insurance company and you have a code base that was written by people that are not even the company anymore, and you still have to maintain it, then it's really interesting to see, do we really need the code? And usually what happens is, I don't know, but just let's maintain it and just let's keep it running.
Yeah.
But if there would be a tool that tells you, you know what, this whole part you never called, so you maybe just can get rid of it.
Yeah.
And that's the idea. One of the tools that we offer is this, and it's quite fascinating to see.
So it can help also to decide we need to refactor this.
Yes.
Because it's used a lot.
Yeah.
We can make it more performant.
This is. I'm not sure if this will be part of it. That's not exactly my idea. But to be honest, I don't know if we will offer that. But having something like this method was called 5,000 times, this method was called 100 times would be great to know, because then you know, oh, this method, we should focus on refactoring. I'm not sure if we will offer that right now. I think right now not, but that might come. It's still, new stuff is coming to the product, right? But it's a cool tool because it's coming again from the JVM. So the JVM tells the cloud what it's working on, and then this is the new thing because it's not something that is coming from an outside tool, but it's a JVM itself, and that makes it interesting.
And that's, I think, the main strong point of Azul. It's a Java company, so really focusing on everything happening in Java.
Yeah.
And the Java runtime has already this knowledge.
Yes.
I have loaded all these classes, and these have been used, and these have not been used.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what now being exposed with this tool.
Yeah. And the good thing is that we figured that out when we started with the AVD, which was the vulnerability detection, that in the beginning only worked in our own JVM, right? And we figured out that this is not a reason for companies to switch JVMs. So they always said, oh, this is really cool. Can we also use this tool on, let's say, SAP machine? No, you can't. But now we can, because now we have an agent. And it's not one of these fat agents that suck 30% of performance, but it's really tiny and really well performing, so that you can hook it up to the JVM and get the information from the JVM without really have a drop in performance. And then this one will tell the cloud about the usage data. So it's quite interesting, and it's now also useful for all kinds of JVMs. Yeah.
Okay, which is a nice thing.
Yeah.
And I know there's great documentation available there because
I know there's some people in our company who's writing the documentation.
Together with Matt, indeed, we have been working a lot on this to expose what is all available in there. Okay.
One of the recent big changes in Java was the introduction of virtual threads. With Balkrishna Rawool, I dove into this very interesting topic, as concurrency and threads can be quite challenging.
My name is Balkrishna Rawool. I work for ING, and I'm really passionate about Java. I've been using Java for 20 years now. What brings me to JCON? Well, I am a speaker here. I'm talking about structured concurrency in Java. That brings me here, but mainly it's the community, everything around Java. So yeah, I really like being part of these conferences, and that brings me here.
Okay, so you have a talk about concurrency.
Uh-huh.
I think that's one of the hard questions at every job interview.
Mhm.
If you want to be a high-level Java programmer,
Right.
what should I know?
Yeah, actually, you triggered me. So before I answer your question, and you say that concurrency is like a hard question on job interviews. That is totally true. What I also notice is that in Java, you have these puzzlers, right? You have programs which seem really simple, but then you have these outputs which are really strange and they baffle you. That's why they are called puzzlers. When you use concurrency, you don't really have to do much to get puzzlers because everything that you write in
Everything.
concurrency is already a puzzler. So yeah, so and those could be pretty tricky questions on interviews as well. What was your question?
So what should I know about concurrency? What are the hot topics
Oh.
nowadays? Virtual threads, is that concurrency?
Yes. Yeah. Well, actually, if you talk about concurrency, it's such a big or vast thing. You have to know about a lot of stuff. Threads, of course, virtual threads nowadays, but also executors, futures, completable futures. Um, yeah, there is quite a lot of stuff. If you want to talk, a bit more low level about locks and semaphores, monitors, but there are really good books, and I think one is always referred, the one from Brian Gates. And I think that's really an awesome book to read. So there's a lot of stuff to be understood about concurrency. And my topic here was about structured concurrency, which is based on virtual threads. So
Okay.
that's also a hot topic, which really good to know about.
And structured concurrency is that you can combine virtual threads or wait until one has finished or all has finished.
Yeah. So structured concurrency as a concept does not have really anything to do with virtual threads. So in general, it is about how you can have control of your concurrency. Um, so if you have multiple tasks and you want them to be arranged in a structure, so you want to do them sequentially, you want to do them parallelly, and how do you do that in your programs? How do you bring that structure and order? That is what structured concurrency is. With Java now supporting virtual threads, we don't have that limitation of trying to manage your threads. You don't want to create too many threads, so that is not there, and therefore it gives you that liberty, that freedom to create threads in a way that you can model your requirements or these requirements about sequential or parallel execution in a much better way. And that's why structured concurrency is now an API built on top of virtual threads. And that's how it connects in Java, those two things. But in general, it is about basically a freedom to organize your concurrency needs in a more structured way.
And is this structured thing something new in Java? Is it only because it was introduced recently in Java?
Yeah, so structured concurrency API is very recently introduced. In fact, it is still a preview as of Java 22. But as a concept, it is like pretty old. In Java, it is new, as I said, right? With the introduction of virtual threads, now you have that freedom that you can create a new virtual thread for every task, and then you can organize these tasks in a more structured and ordered way. And that's why it has recently been introduced as a preview API.
It's a preview.
It is in preview, yeah.
Will it be in 23? Or don't we know yet?
I don't think we know that
Yeah.
yet, and I'm not sure even if the JDK team, the OpenJDK team working on it, knows that, because I think their idea right now is it is done when it is done. So once it is done, that they are happy and satisfied with the version of structured concurrency API they have, they'll make it final. But as of now, it is still in preview.
So you're actually presenting something which is a preview feature.
Yes.
Isn't that a nice thing about Java nowadays, that we have this ongoing work and it's ready when it's ready, like you said,
yeah.
because they are waiting for feedback from the community. This is how we think you will use it. Now tell us how you're actually using it. Are there still errors in there? Does it need to change further?
Yeah, so I think first of all, it's really amazing that we have this ability in Java with preview features that we can experiment with things. And we can give feedback to the OpenJDK team, and they listen to that feedback, and then they adapt those things. So yeah, that's really an awesome thing. Talking about structured concurrency API, which is in preview, so it has gone through multiple revisions. And I remember there was one thing which was recently changed. So actually, they listened to the feedback from the community, and then they changed a few things. So uh, we have an API called structured task scope, and that has a method called fork. Uh, in the past, I think in one of the early versions of structured concurrency, it used to return a future, right? And then you could use that future, you can block on it and do get, so it gives you the actual result. Now it actually returns a new entity called as subtask, and then you can basically play around with that subtask. And so they have changed that API, and I think it is, again, because it is in preview, you have that freedom to change that API and to make it better. And that's why I really like these preview features, because it's another thing, right? You as a Java enthusiast, something I'm really passionate about. I really see these new JPs coming, new preview features coming, and I can't wait to try them. I try these early access versions, so I have a 23 early access version with preview features enabled, and I'm just playing with them. It's so awesome. And also another example with string templates, right? I think that's also a good example that the preview features are working now because the teams are listening. OpenJDK teams are listening to the community, and you can even go back and then rethink about these APIs, right? So it's an thing awesome feature to have, an awesome way to introduce new features
yeah.
for a language.
And indeed, 23 is not there yet,
Mhm.
but you can get early access versions.
Yes.
So if you want to experiment with it, you should not run it in production probably, but
No. Yeah. Well, I think so. What I read somewhere, or I think I heard one of the leaders of OpenJDK team saying that preview features are already production ready. You could use them in production, but I work for a bank, and I'm not sure if I would really want to use the preview features in production. Mainly because the API can change, right? And then do you wanna, like, if the API changes, do you want to just put yourself under time pressure to basically change all your apps and be ready for the next version of Java? So that's why I wouldn't prefer preview features to be used in production. But I think, yeah, you definitely can experiment with it. You can hack around with the API, and it's so awesome to see because you get like the latest cutting edge features already with early access and preview features.
but indeed that's what people should be aware of. The API can still change.
Yes.
So it's only when it's finally provided in the JDK in the next build, then it's stable.
Yes.
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Okay. My next guest is Piotr Przybyl. He came to JCON to give a talk about test containers and how you can test your application in an environment that is similar to your production environment.
I am Piotr, and what I'm doing is just I'm attending the conference, and second, I'm also giving a talk, right? So
Okay.
this is what I do. I go to places and talk to people.
You have a special badge. I want to show it. You have a speaker badge, you have a Java badge, and a Star Trek badge. Explain.
Yes. Well, as I said, I'm a speaker here. Then what I've been doing here for quite a few years is Java. I mean, Java is like, let's say, my predominant technology. And Star Trek, well, I watch Star Trek every now and then, and that's it, right? Just for fun. I
So
mean, because conferences are not only for talking about hard stuff, but also like a little bit of fun.
Okay. And you also distributing chocolate?
Yes.
Why?
Well, I've picked it up from one of the other speakers, right? Nicola Frankel, and now there are more speakers doing this. It's because, like, sharing is caring, right? You bring the sweets from your country where you originate from, and we are not in Poland this time. I mean, I invite everyone to visit Poland. We are going to have like 2 very nice conferences. One will happening this week, which is GeekCon, and the next one in a month, which is DevOps Poland, both in Krakow. So you can, of course, then enjoy Polish cuisine, but today it's impossible, so I just bring a little bit of sweets, and that's it.
I already had a few guests here who will depart this evening
Yes.
to come to Poland for the next conference.
Yes, I know. I'm departing tomorrow, so
Voilà.
I know the drill.
You have the same schedule.
Yes, yes.
You're a speaker. What are you talking about?
So this time I'm talking about, it's going to be like a bit more advanced than usual. I'm talking about how we should be using test containers in a better way. AKA, it's like test containers, if you don't know it, is a technology / library that allows you to run real dependencies for your tests. Not only tests, but predominantly tests. And then you enjoy it. I mean, you've been to a conference or to a workshop, and you bring this technology, this mindset basically, that you test stuff with real stuff to your company, to your team. And fast forward 6 months, everyone was copy pasting like crazy. CI builds start to fail simply because there's not enough money on the credit card and so on, right? And then you brought it, you own it, and you have to fix it, right? Exactly. And the thing is, maybe the problem is not in the computer, maybe the problem is in the chair, right? Basically, maybe we haven't been using test containers in the optimal way, like taking it from the performance point of view, right? So the first example, instead of starting all the containers I need for every test case, right? I just start them once and take care of resetting the state before the tests, right? And this is like the first crucial part. And then there are other techniques. Tomorrow I'll be showing MySQL and Elasticsearch, how you can use these containers more efficiently, right? Basically, reduce the duration of the build pipeline at least a few times.
I'm building a little pet project with a database website thing, and I'm using locally an H2 memory database,
Yes.
and in production a Postgres database.
Mhm.
That's the thing that I can fix with test containers, right?
Yes, or I would say improve, drastically improve. Yes, exactly. So instead of using, I'm not trying to say that any kind of like mocks or spies or fakes or test doubles or whatever are needed. I use them a lot. I still use them because I employ them as a fast failure grid detection network, right? If something is going to break, let's figure it out quickly. But then it doesn't give you confidence that what you're building is actually going to work, right, with the actual thing. Let's take Elasticsearch, right? If you mock it, if you mock Elasticsearch, your test will pass very, very fast, like let's say sub-second, and everyone will be happy, right? Until you decide to jump, for example, and you should have made this jump like long time ago from version 7 to version 8. And then the question is, who is going to read the change log, right, between the version 7 and version 8 and reflect it in all the mocks, right? Good luck doing this, really. That's why it's better. I mean, of course, these tests are going to be somewhat slower. That's. I mean, this cannot be disputed, right? On the other hand, they don't have to take hours. They don't even have to take like quarters. They can just take minutes. But what they can give you is like great confidence that you're testing against the actual thing. And then, like, funny thing happened to my friend. I mean, funny. We are sitting here, so this is funny, right? But Kevin Vitek, the maintainer of test containers, he was trying to travel back with his family, and they have a son. He's more or less 1 year old, right? And then the airline systems or airport systems weren't quite cooperative because this was an exception, right? So see, with this approach, that when you use like a real dependency, you can also put that real data, of course, obfuscated, like no personal information and stuff, right? But this can be like you can take a snapshot from production, make sure it's obfuscated properly, and then you use it, right? And then you're testing not only against the real dependency, but also real data. Like, what can be better than this? I guess only production.
Yeah. And that's what you want to do, is testing in production and move it to testing somewhere else.
Yeah, the Americans call it shifting to the left.
Shifting to the left. Yeah.
Yes.
So you replicate as much as possible your production environment, even way back to your development machine, if you want to.
Yes. I mean, one of the technology / modules I like the most in this ecosystem around test containers is ToxiProxy. And if you haven't heard about ToxiProxy, the name is quite self-explanatory. It's basically a proxy, a network proxy, and you can make it toxic. which means, for example, you can introduce delays to your network. You can introduce dropping packages. You can introduce jitter, whatever, right? Basically, you can programmatically and in a deterministic way test how your system behaves when networks goes crazy. And as we know from production, eventually it can happen, right?
Yeah.
So the whole idea is even this, right? So you don't even go with like real dependencies with real data. You can also have like for some chaos engineering, right? This is, by the way, something I'll be showing this week in Krakow, right, at GeekCon, how we can use this to see, for example, if you have implemented virtual threads from new Java correctly, right?
Okay, good. So a lot to learn about test containers.
I hope so. Well, not
Okay.
only test containers, right? So it's also like Java, it's Elasticsearch and other stuff.
I saw your talk at JFall or JSpring, I cannot remember, with the new features of 21, I think it was at that time.
JSpring, this is where we've met.
JSpring,
Yes.
yeah. So you're very energetic, very fast, but you can learn a lot.
Well, this is the problem which I have when I'm wearing this speaker's hat, right? I mean, it's not the good word, right? But I would love to spread everything I know, just to share everything I know, and I'm always limited by 40,
You
45.
only have that time, yes.
Exactly. So it's the problem, and I annoy these people who love to watch YouTube videos, let's say times 1.5, right? It might be challenging, but then it's like maybe you have to slow
It
down.
can be a knowledge overload problem at that time.
Yes, but this is, you see, this is like what I love about this conference. This is what I love about every other conference and our community, right? Which is, let's not be afraid to admit that Java centric, right? Everyone was saying Java's slow, it's dying. I mean, and maybe, I mean, Java 7 this time, right? It was true, but now it's accelerating. It's going faster and faster. And then, I mean, even if you're to cover just what happened to Java standard library, right? Within last year, 12 months, which is 2 releases. I mean, to go deeply within like regular conference slot is impossible.
Yeah.
So it's also like I would say a good sign of something positive, right? And then you scratch also other topics like GRA or things that come from Azul with Crack, right? For example, that this is addressing the issue that the thing is starting really slow, and so on. And it shows you like that companies like also doing their own garbage collectors and whatnot. So it's like great place to be in and great time to live in, I would say.
I think the people who hate Java for being slow are stuck on Java 8, I think. They probably missed what happened in the last 4 or 5 years with all these evolutions.
I think you might be right, really. And it's like I mean, even if I'm not talking about garbage collectors, for example, I use this example. So you take your whole application, right? It can be just packed in a jar file, created using Java 8, and then you deploy it on modern GDK, right? And so what happens since that? We have compact strings, we have new garbage collectors, we have application CDS, right? And CDS in general. You can go, for example, for Crack, for fast startup types, and so on and so on. And this is, you don't even have to touch the source code. You don't even touch the jar file, right? And now it seems that it's like it scales out better, right? And everything. The only thing you have to do is you have to switch for virtual threads manually in the code. That has to happen, right? But apart from that,
just run it.
Just run it. Just keep your Docker files updated, and that's it, right?
That's it. Okay, that's a nice message to conclude.
Another important topic related to testing is flaky tests. How do you handle tests which only fail from time to time and make your whole test report unreliable? François Martin had a talk about this subject, and he came to the conference together with Annelore Egger, who was one of the many volunteers.
Hello, my name is François Martin. I'm here at JCON because I give here a talk, and also I'm a volunteer, so I help the people to get their badges registered and so on in the morning.
A lot of volunteers I've seen. We already had a few of them here.
Cool.
Are you also involved in the JUC, or is it just here at the conference that you're volunteering?
Actually, not yet, but I was really considering it heavily. I mean, I also help organize the Hacker Garden in Switzerland sometimes, but apart from that, not really yet. But it's on my list definitely.
And you're the speaker.
Yeah,
What's
correct.
the topic?
So the topic is about Flaky Tests actually, and I'm doing it with Brian Demers together with him. I have to say, it really, looking at the preparations that we have done so far, I'm really looking forward to the talk tomorrow because I feel like it will be really great. I feel like it was a good decision to do it together with someone else, even though in the beginning, of course, it's always a bit of a risk doing it together with someone else. But it worked out really well, and I feel like the talk wouldn't have been as good if I would have done it by myself. So,
what is the definition of a Flaky test? Sometimes it fails, sometimes it breaks.
Yeah, exactly. So it's essentially a test. If you run it multiple times, sometimes it fails and sometimes it passes. So,
and why? Could be different reasons, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we covered those in detail in our talk, but one of the very common reasons is, for example, what I see people doing a lot is, for example, they wait for 1 second. For example, they click a button and then they wait for 1 second, and then they, see if something appears, a success message or something like this, and then the test fails if the load is quite high on the system, for example, or on the load of the build, system, and then the test fails. And then if you run it locally or if you rerun it when there is less load on the build runners, then it's
okay.
It's fine. Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the very common reasons, but there are many more reasons, of course, why this could happen.
Is it a bad idea to have a wait in a test?
Not necessarily, but what you should do instead is wait for a certain action, and you should have a timeout in it. So, for example, you say you wait for the success message, but you say, for example, you wait for a success message to appear, and you have a timeout, for example, of 30 seconds. So then the test framework waits until it appears, and as soon as it appeared, it will continue. There's another advantage that usually the tests are also faster if, for example, there is not that much load on the system. Because, for example, it could be that already in 200 milliseconds this is fulfilled. So, and then you're still waiting 1 second if you're waiting for a fixed interval. So,
the example you give is a UI test.
Yeah.
Is it using some library which is good to use in Java to do this, or is this an integration test? How do you set up such a system?
So in Java, there is, for example, Selenium, which is quite a classic that you can use for this. With Selenium, you can do this as well, where you can say you wait for something specifically. But there are also many other frameworks you can use that are not Java-based, for example, like WebDriver.io, or, even Cypress can do things like this, or a lot of other tools. Playwright is also a common one that gets used more and more now. So, yeah. But Selenium is like a classic that gets used quite a lot.
Probably the most known tool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you're here as a speaker, but I guess you're also doing some visiting some other talks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you pick them, or is it just at random?
No, I picked them. So I looked at the schedule beforehand, and I really chose a few topics that really interested me, and I really would like to cover.
Can you share a few of them? What you're looking forward to?
Sure. What I'm looking forward to is a good question. I don't have it in my mind right now, but I remember I visited just earlier a talk from Gerrit, which was about garbage collectors. And this was really interesting because I'm not really up to date on the, on all of the types, and this really helped me in a way. And I also really enjoyed the talk by Merit, which was about reading code, which I feel like this skill is very important, that it's not talked about enough, as she also said in her talk. And I can really recommend this talk as well if somebody has the chance to see it. But I have to look at my list of the talks, then probably it will come into my mind again, okay, sure.
When you leave.
Yeah.
But I had Gerrit here just before his talk.
Interesting.
He was a bit wondering if it would not be too heavy, because there are a lot of garbage collectors, so there's a lot of knowledge he wanted to share. It was the first time he gave this specific talk.
Okay.
Any feedback?
Yes, sure. I gave him some feedback already earlier, but I have to say, I feel like it was very well done in a way that the slides were very well structured. So there was a lot of information on there, but it was written in a way that is very easy to understand. He put it like in a tabulatory way, and they always used the same criteria. and you put next to it, for example, when was it introduced, when should you use it, when should you not use it. And I think this is a really handy reference when I need to, for example, choose which garbage collector to use. Then I can go through the slides and see which one fits best. I didn't fully understand all of the explanations around how the garbage collectors work themselves in detail. But in most cases, unless you're debugging some strange garbage collection issues, I think this will probably not be something that you need to really know about anyways. So
I think, and I said this before to a few people, more you have a higher chance of finding an issue in your own code compared to the JDK, to the runtime.
Absolutely.
If something goes wrong, it's probably your own code.
Absolutely.
Almost falling for.
Oh, no problem. Don't worry.
The JDK as such is very stable, but there are issues. So it can happen indeed that you find a problem there. But before you find a problem there, probably need to look into your own code.
Absolutely. But it's surprising me always. I remember, I was a lecturer for around 2 years. And I remember in one of the classes I was teaching JavaFX. And there, for some reason, we found a bug in JavaFX itself. And I was totally surprised by that because, as you mentioned, usually you don't assume that the bug is in whatever library or whatever you're using. And I was so surprised that even students, especially students were able to find something.
And the nice thing is if you can report it and make it reproducible. And that's, I think that's the biggest issue if you find a bug also in your own code. Is how you make it reproducible. Even add it to a test so that you know that you have fixed it. And that's, I think, a nice challenge for every developer to be able to reproduce an error.
Absolutely. And I think this is also, if we go back to the Flaky Tests thing, this is also something that is very challenging with Flaky Tests. If you have a Flaky test, usually it makes sense to reproduce it locally as well. But sometimes that's very difficult. I remember when I worked for a different company, I had one of the projects where we had an issue where actually on one of the build runners, it was failing, but locally it was running fine. And I tried to reproduce it as closely as I could. I used the same Docker containers, everything, and I couldn't get to reproduce it. And I was really stumped for a long time. And then, I had the idea of just SSHing into the build runner. And then I ran it, there, and then I was able to debug it this way. And this way, I found that the issue was actually, a concurrency issue where the machine on the build runner was not as fast or faster, I'm not 100% sure, something like that, than our machines where it was running on, which caused the test to fail. And you also need to be able to reproduce it to be able to fix the Flaky test in most cases. I mean, unless it's something very simple, like with the 1 second delay, for example. If you know that this is something that is very flaky, then usually you don't need to reproduce it. But this is also always something that's very tricky, especially if you have cases like this where it's just about the infrastructure itself that is causing troubles.
We discussed it here before. You should get your tests as close as possible to the build and the runtime environment, like for instance with test containers. Can also help to avoid this kind of cases. Okay.
Exactly.
My name is Annelore Egger. I'm mostly here, first of all, because my fiance is a speaker, so that's why
I wanted to see it.
Yeah, it's the second time that I was here. So I really like JCON last year as well. And of course, I'm a software developer, so I like to learn new things about Java and also to meet new people from the community.
You're also a volunteer, I see, on your badge.
Yes.
So you help with the conference.
Yes.
Is that important for you to be part of this community of people organizing Java events?
Yes, I think it's important that there's also there's always a need for people that help. So in general, I find the community is important because you can reach much more things if you work together and combine ideas. So such events are very important, and so they run. In order to make them run smoothly, it's important that
to help. You said you're a Java developer.
Yes.
What technologies of Java are you using?
I used to work with Spring, and I will also work with Spring again at my new job. But in the meantime, I worked more like self-developed like frameworks, and yes, I use. I also worked already with Java 21 a bit, but I'm not sure which level
So,
it is.
as a Java developer,
Yeah.
are you also following these evolutions, like you said, Java 21? I know it depends on the company you work
Yes.
for. If they want to migrate to newer versions, is it out of personal interest, or was it already used at the company?
A bit of both. So, like the company switched to the new to Java 21, but I'm also interested. So I also read like blog posts or summaries on what the new features are, and yes, also like try to incorporate them when it makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, yes.
Did you know Foojay up front?
I don't think so.
So we have some work to do. We have to promote ourselves a bit more, because we try to bring the love for Java and all these new features to the community, and introduce them.
That's the end of part 4 of the JCON interviews. I have one more for you for next week with Simon Martinelli, Nicolas Frankel, Marcus Helberg, Rick Ossendrijver and Abdel Sigouar about CQRS, Juke, GraphQL, API versioning, Vaadin, Open Rewrite, error-prone gateways, proxies and even more. See you next week.
Give me a foo, give me a J, give me the friends of OpenJDK.